You're surprised at what people actually think they can get away with in the workplace. My dream career was to be a singer, but obviously, your parents tell you need something that's a little more consistent. Then when I got to law school, I figured I wanted to be a business lawyer or one of the workers to run to the Department of Labor. And that's not really what you want. Is that person dependent on your business for their livelihood? That's not typical with a contract. In business, you're going to take risks. But when it comes to your workforce, I would say my recommendation would be that's not a risk that you want to have.
Hello, welcome. My name is Carline Cadet Francois, and all I do is bring you resources within the senior care industry to help you succeed. We help busy professionals open and operate successful assisted living facilities throughout the state of Florida with our proven methods. Today, we are here with some exciting news about how to structure your business. If for some reason you find value in this recording, please consider to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who will find it valuable. Joining us today is attorney Shayla Waldon, a business and employment law expert helping companies stay compliant and grow their business in confidence. We are going to dive straight into how to structure your care business for success. Without further ado, Ms. Shayla, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Shayla Waldon. I am by trade a labor and employment attorney, specifically for business owners, helping them manage their challenges with their workforce or getting ahead of those challenges so that they can set their business up for success. Born and raised in West Palm Beach, Florida, went to what I think is the best school ever, the University of where I received both my undergrad and law degrees. Have been practicing since 2013, so September will make about 12 years. I think I know a little thing or two about some of this, so I'm happy to share what I know and the journey that business owners face are getting started and even after they've been in business for a while.
Amazing. I love it. And I know you could tell it's the best school because we can see all the signs on the background. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I love the fact that you have so much experience. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the employment law? What led you to start the Waldon Law Firm?
So what led me into employment law was kind of a process of elimination. That's kind of how I got to be a lawyer at first. I looked at a bunch of different careers and said, not this one, not this one, not that one. And my dream career was to be a singer. But obviously, your parents tell you need something that's a little more consistent. So I always liked reading and writing, so lawyer became something I wanted to do. When I got into college, I started thinking about and then when I got to law school, I figured I wanted to be a business lawyer of some kind and wanted to completely stay away from the courtroom. But then I did what we call moot court and got a taste of what, being in court kind of is like. So that kind of helped me decide, okay, well, maybe I might want to do a little bit of time. The best way to combine those, I found out through an internship that I did in law school, was labor and employment law. I'm a nerd at heart. I don't wear these glasses for anything. So in that respect, I love the academic piece of the law. And labor and employment law has so many statutes and regulations that are only just now being interpreted. So, for instance, the Fair Labor Standards Act has existed, which governs wage and hour responsibilities for employers. It has been around since 1938, but we're still figuring out what some of that means, right, through the courts. And I love that academic exercise. I think labor and employment is one of the juiciest types of practice areas, too, because you're surprised at what people actually think they can get away with in the workplace. And so the academic part of it, combined with what is like a reality TV show in my case files, was a wonderful combination for me. So I worked in what we call in the profession big law. So big firms where you have like 500, 600, 700, 1,000 lawyers in a firm. And decided after a while that really wasn't for me. And I also decided ultimately that I needed to be there for my family. I was a caretaker for my mother and needed the flexibility to be able to continue doing what I love and also being able to be there when she needs me. And so after a brief stint in-house, I decided, I went to work with a business partner. That ultimately didn't work out. And so did what I think, I will say God was probably telling me I should have done in the first place, was to start the Waldon law firm, solo practice dedicated to helping business owners with their employment and business challenges, because it gives me the best of both worlds. A lot of what I do is literally just sitting and talking with business owners about what are their fears, what are they facing, and helping them to find solutions for those things, as opposed to always thinking about going to court. But if I got to go to court for you, I'll do that too.
Wow, that is so amazing. I love the fact that we're both geeks. We don't wear these glasses for no reason, okay? We like to read.
Exactly. Part of the uniform.
Part of the uniform, okay? We will dissect those words. We will find those hidden solutions. And I also love the fact that you got on your own because you wanted to be there for your family. You care for your mom, your caretaker. And I think for most of my audience, part of the reasons why they want to open their own business, they want to succeed in their own business, is because they too want to spend time with their family. Most of them are caregivers, okay? Whether it's caring for mom and dad at home, caring for relatives, or if they do it as a business where they care for people. Majority of our customers are nurses, people from the medical field. And so I think we share that aspect of life because we all want to do better for ourselves. So with that said, what led you to want to support and provide value to our caregivers who are structuring their businesses?
So I started working with home care businesses when I was still in the big law firm. And I remember we had gotten a few matters in where it was a franchise business because a bunch of people were starting their, home care assistance type businesses. And with some of the challenges that they were having was, okay, well, I need to provide round the clock care, or someone needs to live in with the person. How do we structure that? Some had businesses where they were working in multiple states. So they were working here in Florida, New York, California, Illinois, and each one of those states has different types of wage and hour obligations, especially California. The running joke in employment law is that California is its own country when it comes to employment laws. And so got really heavily involved in that. And there was actually a big lawsuit in 2014, I think is when it was filed. It was a trade association working on behalf of home health companies to try to block a change in a Department of Labor rule that pertains specifically to the work that home health companies were doing. And so while we awaited whether the rule was contemplated was either going to be accepted or invalidated, which it ultimately was accepted, we were working, around the clock with monitoring that and helping these businesses manage those challenges. And so ever since then, I've kind of been involved with those kinds of companies because it's not only the wage and hour concerns, but also looking at, how they classify their workers. Oftentimes, you have people trying to figure out, is it employee, contractor? A lot of times it's cheaper to be a contractor or to have contractors. So helping those kinds of businesses with those challenges, because they're often low-hanging fruit for the Department of Labor to come after them, or for one of the workers to run to the Department of Labor. And that's not really what you want.
Yes, I can imagine, because it could be really confusing for a lot of our clients are caregivers, like caretakers. They love people. They want to care for people. Show up at their ALF. I mean, their clients are like nearly perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
But then they struggle when it comes to the business aspect of running their care business, because the focus could be so much in caregiving that you forget that you're actually running a business. And so you went into a little bit about the difference between an employee and a contractor. Can you go into a little deeper to tell the difference between the two?
Sure. So I like to think about it this way, and it's often what I tell my clients, particularly in this industry. Employee is the rule, That's the default rule, and contractor is the exception. So an employee, most people think about that's the one who, they get a set hourly wage or weekly salary. They have everything's reported on the W-2. And then also, that's when you can tell that person when to be at work, when they need to go to lunch, and when they need to go home. That's kind of how most people think of an employee. There's also a level of control over that person's schedule and assignment that doesn't or shouldn't exist with contractors. So a contractor, most of us think of, that's your 1099. That's what people immediately comes to mind for a lot. But there are a number of different tests used to distinguish between employee and contract. So it's going to depend on what law you're looking at. If we're talking about the Fair Labor Standards Act, there are different tests that uses as compared to other types of laws. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, we're often looking at what is the economic reality of the situation. Is that person dependent on your business for their livelihood? That's not typical with a contract. Maybe your business or your company may be the biggest contract they have at that moment, but ultimately that person is supposed to be holding themselves out as taking on other contracts if they indeed are a contractor. But if they show up for you 60, 70 hours a week, kind of hard to see that person as a contractor, because when do they have time to work for someone else? So that's kind of the idea to distinguish, particularly under the Fair Labor Standards Act. The IRS has another test that's like 20 or 21 factors, many of which are focused on control. How much control do you exert over this worker? Yet another test is unemployment. So federal unemployment, state unemployment has another test for how you distinguish. And workers' compensation is huge because there's a test for what is specifically a contractor, which is defined under the statute. And getting that wrong when there's an injury that occurs can incur so many different types of fines. But in a nutshell, you're looking at how much control do you have over that person's work and assignments? Are you directing that person's schedule? Are they able to choose or refuse assignments? And do they depend on you for their livelihood? Do they spend most of their time working with you as opposed to finding opportunities for themselves? Do they have to provide their own materials? These are all questions that you need to ask in deciding how, as you build out your workforce, how you're going to structure your relationship with the workforce, whether you're going to make them employees or contractors. A lot of times hiring entities spend so much time trying to put in the exception, and they take on loads of legal risk when maybe it costs you some cash up front, but employee status is probably more likely the way you should probably go. But obviously each business is different, and you should definitely consult with employment counsel to work through it.
Absolutely. And you are a resource that they can reach out to have those conversations and to help them establish what is best and answer any questions that they may have. Thinking through the things that you say, even though we are required as care businesses to have a schedule. I want to say if someone started as a 1099 or the operator or the business owner can't really tell the difference between the two, how can they go about establishing a structure to where both the person working there and the business owner or the operator would know whether or not they're doing the right things and they are protected?
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with communication, right? There's got to be some kind of communication between you and the worker to kind of get a sense of what they're doing, how much they're doing, what do they have going on outside of working for you, right? Now, that's not to say that there are times when people can have multiple jobs where they are employed. So that's not to say just because they work in many different places that means by that very fact that they are a contract. But communication with the workers, but also it's a communication really the business owner could have with themselves and whoever they have around them on their team. So there's a lot of business workshops I've attended over the years where you think about the team that you have around you to have those resources. And a couple of the people that should be on your team is, obviously your accountant, your lawyer, and perhaps want to consider somebody who has experience with doing day-to-day HR. And having those people on your team can help you make that decision better because you're able to kind of have that internal conversation about where's my business now and where do I want to get to? And how do I do that without incurring so much liability along the way? Because in business, you're going to take risks. But when it comes to your workforce, I would say my recommendation would be that's not a risk that you want to have too much. It's always a risk having employees, but you don't want to take on that risk. So it's in a nutshell, it really is internal conversation about where are you going and where do you see yourself going? To know as you add more people, how are you going to structure that so that you don't bankrupt your business should they become angry with? Because, if you ask yourself, if I made any one of these workers mad, am I still going to be okay, right? Oftentimes seen in my practice where people are completely fine until you do that one thing to make them mad. And then they remember, yeah, I know I've been working 1099 contractor, but something I read on Google says I really should have been an employee. And next thing you know, they're sitting in somebody's office, like a friend of mine is a plaintiff side employment lawyer. And they're sitting in her office on Zoom saying, I'm mad and I really think I was an employee. What do you think? That's not where you want to have your employees or workers running. And so if you're willing to bend over backwards, to keep people happy and do whatever they want, well, then fine. But you have a business to run and you can't do that all the time. So put yourself in the best defensible position so that if you have to make tough decisions, you're as legally insulated.
Absolutely. And I mean, you said so much here. I think also education play a major key because if you don't know that you need, for example, if they didn't know they need you right now they're finding out, right? But then again, you just mentioned at least 3 other people that they also need, right? But it's education that opened up their eyes for them to know that. And talking about bending backward, oh my God. I have heard horror stories. Okay. We know that Agency of Healthcare Administration don't have the time to just make pop-up visits like that. I mean, so many horror stories with the agency popping up, and it's because the operator not bending backward nice enough or don't know how to treat people correctly. Something is wrong to where their own staff is reporting them. But now you're saying even worse, their own staff will then be seated at somebody's office looking for a lawsuit. And as we know, these lawsuits can literally bankrupt and close you down and cause you to having to go into so many different issues. So, I mean, I think education play a major role, and I'm so grateful that you're here providing this type of value to our audience. So since we're on this topic of the angry employee realizing, oh, I was an employee, not a 1099. Overall, can you go into some of the things that could go wrong with that? Like some of the results of having been sat in front of that other lawyer looking into a lawsuit, what that would look like for the owner of the business?
It depends. So I'll tell a story. It's a different industry, but similar content. I think this client had come to me literally an hour before an unemployment hearing. And looking at all of the documents and evidence, which wasn't much that the client, but apparently all these documents had been submitted to the Unemployment Commission that I wasn't aware of. But this worker who had been a contractor for years was alleging that he was an employee for unemployment compensation purposes, right? So oftentimes that's the first thing that people do. They file for unemployment. And you're like, well, they weren't an employee, so I don't have to worry about unemployment. And that's what this employer thought too. The Unemployment Commission found that worker to be an employee, granted them unemployment. And so then there was an unemployment tax audit about not paying unemployment tax. So once that determination was made, because I'm like, I'm looking at the information, I'm like, this guy was an employee. So, I agree. It's hard to defend, right? So then they turn around, and this was actually in California. They filed a lawsuit Now that you have this unemployment determination that you're an employee, in law, we have what's called like judicial note, right? So this is on record that a tribunal of some sort has found that this person is an employee based on certain factors, right? And they filed a lawsuit alleging discrimination, unpaid wages, unreimbursed expenses. And I believe that there was a 7-figure demand in that case. 7 figure. Now I was able to negotiate it down to on the lower 6 figure, but that was something that the wrong classification snowballed into something much greater by trying to avoid the cost that may be associated with running payroll, right? So obviously you have the expense of payroll processing. You got to pay the taxes, the employer and employee portion. You have the administrative burden of having to manage all of that time. Sure, it's costly, it's a burden, but it's nothing compared to the burden of paying out thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars because you got the classification wrong. So what may seem like a small issue right now can turn into something much bigger. And I think you mentioned about ACA, right? Coming in and auditing or investigating, and oftentimes it is because of an employee or a worker report, right? Because they don't always just show up. Same thing with Department of Labor audits. They don't always just show up. It's because someone called and said, I think we down here are not being paid the wages we're supposed. And oftentimes it's because somebody got mad. And it is very costly, something that I counsel all my clients on. Yes, you can probably save money doing it this way, but what's it going to get you in the long run? Because you really want to be in business always looking over your shoulder. That's not a way to run a business.
I agree. And it's very stressful to have to look over your shoulder. Ultimately, it's more expensive to do the wrong thing than to do the right thing, especially when you've been lucky enough to where now you have the education and the resource to be able to do the right thing. I know you also went into HR, and we're going to go into HR, but for someone, some people probably like going like, oh my God, I need to fix things, right? So for someone who is just getting into the business, they're at the very first phase of opening the business. What are some things that they should do to make sure that they don't fall into those type of traps? How should they structure their business?
So the structure of the business itself is going to depend on largely a conversation with your accountant, right? Because there may be certain tax goals that you're looking to achieve, right? So you may, for some people, they may want to incorporate because at some point they may want to be able to raise capital by soliciting shareholders and investors that way. You can kind of do the same thing with a limited liability company or an LLC, but it's a little easier, with a corporation by, just issuing shares of stock, right? Also, when you're thinking about, okay, corporation or LLC, it's like, well, how are you going to be taxed, right? So if you have a corporation, depending on its size, have a C Corp that's taxed at the corporate level, and then you're taxed again on your individual income that you take out of the corporation, or that you earn through the corporation. Or you may elect to be taxed as what's called an S Corp, subchapter S corporation. So that kind of gives you what we call the flow through benefit that often is related to an LLC, but it's a particular tax status that allows you to do that so that the money is only taxed once. Most times when you have a subchapter S corporation, the business owner themselves has to take what's called a reasonable salary, right? Now you got to work with your accountant, accountant and bookkeeper to figure out what is a reasonable salary based on what your business is earning and what is the market for the type of role. If you're the owner of a business or in this industry, what do most owners own for a business of this size? Those are things that you got to be thinking about as you're setting things up. And, that S Corp election doesn't have to be made when you start the business because, look, you may not be earning that much to be able to take and pay yourself a salary every 2 weeks or twice a month or even once monthly. So you can make that election later when your income is a little more. So that is a conversation you have to set up and get related documents filed and drafted. You can definitely work with a lawyer, but with your specific financial goals, what you're hoping to do on a tax basis, you definitely got to have an accountant, a CPA on your team of resources that you have for sure. I think that's, very key. And, you can also choose the limited liability company, which is very common because there's not quite as many formalities that you have that would be present with a corporation. Now, with a corporation, you got to have shareholders meetings, you have to have meeting minutes, notice of the meeting. LLC is a little more flexible. You don't quite have to have so many things documented. Though, when you have a meeting amongst the members, even with yourself as the sole member, you're like, what are we doing in the business? Myself said, But LLCs are often the most favorite type of entity because it's more flexible. But you can also elect to be taxed like an S corp with an LLC as well. Again, it's a conversation with your accountant, and you don't want to get that wrong or elect that status and you can't continue to maintain it because it may have some tax consequences for you later.
Wow, so much said in that. I think it's so profound to go into those type of conversation, even with you as an attorney, and then also with your CPA. We do plan to have a CPA that will be a speaker that will come out and educate the community. So I encourage the community to be on the lookout for that. And I'm also going to find a resource for HR expert that will come out. So what I want to do is I want to provide the different pieces for you to be able to solve the puzzle, right? Because I think having resources and having education is so important for success. And we know within our caregiving industry, we don't like to share information too much, right? I like to say there's enough for all of us to win, but I think it's just my mindset that's like that. There's a few others like me out there, but it's just so hard to find legitimate information and to find the right resources. And you sit there and you watch everybody else thriving, but you're not thriving. It's because you lack the information. And my goal is to bring you the information, to not just educate you, but to give you someone, a company that can actually provide the actual help for that solution. So it's just, now it's on you to take action. Okay. I don't want to see you in trouble. I don't want to hear that, bad things are happening to you, because I care for you to succeed. And all of my guests care for you to succeed. What challenges do ALF and home health companies face, and how do they go about fixing those things?
I think we touched a little bit on this a little earlier, but one of the biggest challenges is how you're classifying workers, right? That's one of before we even get into the nitty gritty with the employees themselves, off the top, how are we classifying the work? Going to set the tone for how your legal compliance pathway needs to be structured. Are you intending more of a contractor type model? And if so, there are some things we need to do, certain agreement a lot more needs to be in writing. Employee status, a lot needs to be in writing there too, but that's another different separate type of legal compliance path. Some of the other challenges, wage and hour. So I mentioned earlier about how sometimes there are some people who work your standard 8-hour day, 40 hours a week, right? Then there's some people who they work 24-hour shift. And how do we do that? How do you account for sleep time, right? If the sleep time is broken, how do you account for that? What do you need to do? If the person is living, how do you account for that, right? There have been some changes in the regulations related to that over the last 10 years. And so maybe people have an idea from, like you said, they're getting information from people before, and now they need to make sure they have the most up-to-date information. The other thing is that I've come across a little less often, but it still happens, like when we're dealing with harassment or discrimination. So sometimes it may be a situation that there is, sexual harassment going on where you have maybe the client is harassing the employee. And if that's the case, what are you as the employer doing about it? Turning a blind eye to it will cost. And not getting the right kind of advice on what to do about it will cost. Discrimination, dealing with, your clients, or how are you divvying up opportunities? Who gets to work with the best clients, right? Or how do you, if you're giving training for new opportunities, how are you divvying that up? So those are basic challenges to almost any industry. But the classification and the wage and hour are the things that I often come across the most in home health. And the other thing, because many of the workers work for different agencies, right? There's a lot of what we call like poaching of workers. And what I mean by that is that you'll have one company will go and take workers from another company. They'll try to recruit them away. Like say you're business owner A, but business owner B is actively recruiting to take your workers away. You have spent thousands of dollars training these people. And here someone else comes and is taking them away. Or you may have your workers taking your clients away. The clients may try to take your worker. So you spent and invested thousands of dollars in training people, but there are all of these outside entities that are trying to, kind of benefit from what you did. So I actually have one client now, a home health client, that we're in litigation about that. And so that is also a thing I've seen a lot. Probably, if I had to rank them, it's the classification, the wages, the poaching, and then we have the discrimination. Those are the top four things that I see affecting the industry.
Wow. And it is real when you hear it's expensive, like you said, to train. Well, first off, I like to say the good staff are born that way, and you can fine tune them by training them. So it's already difficult to find the good staff that legitimately care about, what they're doing, and there are seniors, and to provide the care for someone else. And then after you train them, it becomes so expensive. It is true. It is a thing going on where companies they're not treating you right. Come over here. We'll give you a raise. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. And then they'll find themselves over there. It is true that sometimes if you manage to have a bad apple, right? A bad staff, someone who pretends to be good when in reality they're not, they come in, they will try to steal your clients. So you have to be involved. I tell business owners, be involved. You can have a manager, you can have people that help you, but actually take some time to go and visit and talk to the residents, talk with the staff, and actually get to know who are in your business. If you're in it passively, I think the best case scenario are for people who are in it actively, because they get to see their clients, they get to see everything that's going on. But those who are in it passively, you do need to find some time. And if you don't find the time, hire somebody to go in and actually dig in and try to find out what's truly going on in the business, because those things do happen. Now, I want to say I come across not just those that are starting their business. So if you're starting the business, we learned so far you are going to structure the business, figure out what type of corporation or structure you want to have. You want to hire a lawyer to set up the structure, but you want to speak with an accountant to figure out your tax advantages. And then after that, you're going to figure out how you're going to hire your employees, right? You're going to figure out which classification you're going to put them, and you're not going to get them confused, right? Because if you do, then all this work for nothing. You literally hired Carline and her team to get you your ALF license, and now it's in jeopardy. You don't want to do that, right? And then after that, you want to make sure you have someone with HR knowledge that can guide you and help you figure things out. And we are going above and beyond looking for those resources and bringing them to you.
That's a great summation. I think that is exactly what your audience needs to know, because I was speaking to a group yesterday and I said employment law and employment law compliance is not something you can't wing it. It's strategic. You have to set up a strategy based on your business goals. Surround yourself, like you said, with the right team, right? Someone who can advise you on the legal aspects, and maybe as you continue to grow, you want someone who can be there day to day with that HR experience, because winging it is not an option. You want.
Absolutely, I agree. And even if you can't hire the HR person for like a full time, you can do part time. You can, work out some type of structure with them to where most people legitimately want to help. And so I know a lot of the audience also, they are people that already have an ALF, and then there are those who are in the process of getting one, and then there are those who want to scale, who wants to open multiple locations. What are some advice you would have for someone, let's say, who is already an established ALF? They've learned some things that that they need to fix, that they need to cure, but then they want to open another location. Any advice you have for those people?
I was actually speaking with another business owner, and they said the way to kind of go about doing that is make sure that in your first location, you run through your processes. Like, nothing's going to be perfect, right, all the time, but you've got enough of a well-oiled machine that your processes are working as efficiently as possible, and you're maintaining compliance as much as you can. Right. You've got the right team together. So now you've got a whole structure, a whole blueprint. Just take that and duplicate it. And not just like, okay, this is a satellite office over here, we don't really care. Duplicate the process. Right? No matter how small that other location is to start with, you're duplicating the process that you've already established and put together, so that you don't have to start over from scratch there. Right? You've got your checklist. You've got, okay, well, all right, I've got a location in West Palm Beach. I'm going to open one in Fort Lauderdale. Okay, West Palm Beach does this and this. Well, the only thing you should be allowing for in terms of differences is like, what are the ordinances that differ from Palm Beach County and West Palm Beach to Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, right? There may be some differences there, but as far as your internal processes, you've got to make sure that those are set and squared away, so that all you have to do is just hire the people and duplicate the process. That makes scaling, I think, a little easier that way once your processes are set and efficient enough.
I agree 100%, because all that you just mentioned are systems. People hear the word system and they think it's complicated. Really, it is not. Okay. It is literally putting together a set of rules, a set of structure, a set of what didn't work, what we need to do better on, how we need to do it. And then you literally pick the best of that and multiply it and duplicate it. And it's one of the things that we do when we help clients open their assisted living. We have what I call a roadmap. It's literally systems that we put in place to where Akash shows up and they literally know our brand at this point, and they go through, everything is in order, it flows correctly and providing more than what they're looking for. And that's the system that we have around getting you your ALF license or helping you to achieve your ALF license. And if I ever get sick during your process, one of my team members can literally hop in, follow those steps, and help you continue your processes. I think systems are very important. And sometimes us as business owners, we can get it wrong. But I think being a geek help us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those things like how they say you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And your efficiency of your systems and processes helps you do that. Because, like you said, if someone gets sick, they can just come in because your processes are so, you've got it down to a science, right? So you've got a formula working that helps you be able to be efficient. Or if you have an interruption like ACA or the DOL or OSHA stepping into your space and saying, hey, we're here to investigate, you can handle that, or your staff knows what to do in those circumstances. And systems, I can't overstate the importance of them. And they're things that you're always going to be revamping as you figure out new and different ways to do things. Even in my own business, I look at this has worked, that hasn't, we tried this, that doesn't work. We're going to do something different till we get it down to a science, right? And if you're not revamping or innovating, then you're becoming stagnant, right? But having a baseline set of systems is key. I completely agree with you.
Absolutely. We are so grateful to have you here. How can my audience find you?
I'll give you my phone number. That's the easiest way to get to me. 561-293-2313. So that is the firm's main number, but that rings directly to me. Also can send an email to info, I-N-F-O, at thewaldonlawfirm.com if you're looking to schedule a consultation or want to know more about my firm's services. And the Waldon Law Firm, PLLC, is on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, so you can definitely find us there. Find some more informational videos to learn a bit more about my practice.
Absolutely. I love it. Please, if you find any value in this, go and show Shayla some love, okay? Call her office, let her know you appreciate her services, you appreciate the knowledge that she brought you, and take advantage of that free phone call, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you actually present your specific case, and she's able to help you fix whatever is broken. And if it's not an area of her expertise, legal law that she covers, she has the resources. She can also provide you the proper people that can assist you, okay? And if you found any value in this video, please consider to like and subscribe and share it with someone who will find it valuable. Until next time, I love to serve you and I am grateful for your time. Have a good day. Talk soon, okay? Until next time, see you in the next one.